Thank you very much, Barbara. And our last speaker in this section about activism is Saimir Kristo. Professor Dr. Saimir Kristo is an architect and urban designer, founder of Tirana Architecture, a Triennale Architecture Fund in Albania, and Open House Tirana, and also Dean at the Faculty of Applied Sciences and Creative Industries at the Barleti University.
It's more than enough.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you to Robert for inviting, Hubert for the recommendation, and to Peter who will be assisting from the ground floor today. I would like to introduce you a bit of the sense of activism in Tirana. And the sense of activism, of course, lays in more societal and economical elements. It's not just what we just do in the city. It's also to what we interact with its citizens and all the background. Next. I will blast you with a few videos today, continue, and in order to give you a lot of vibes and senses, can we raise the volume? Next. What you heard was the installation of a young group called Kumbima. Next, please. And they try to depict during the Tirana Architecture Triennale, but also presented in Tbilisi, all the voices and the echoes of the city of Tirana between religious coexistence. You heard the voices and sounds from all religious groups in Albania, sounds of bicycles, road noises, rings, construction sites, and pedestrians walking and chatting in the streets. Next. So the origin and the sense of the development of the city started in the 1600s when the Ottoman past, of course, was clear. Next. But the spread of the city was just among these five main traveler, let's say, commercial streets. Next. And when the capital was in the face of an invasion, this fascist invasion, which transformed by intention the identity of the city. Next. Of course, the image of that Ottoman village transformed into a city with a new boulevard. You would say there was not a city, but a new boulevard was coming, the idea of working in the facades. Next. And another change of identity. The communist blocs, apart from moving the main boulevards and creating a new image, they try to hide the Ottoman houses inside the living blocks. Next. And we had, of course, the intention of from few architects during the 50s that studied in Vienna and Graz, like Sokrat Mosko, Ganis Razimiri, and Skanderi Dorasi, to take that initiative, provide new housing, which would, of course, integrate values of living inside the garden, but also creating a high-level quality for the inside apartments of the residents. Next. From that point on, of course, the dictatorship, as I always refer to it, not socialism, not communism, had a clear plan to keep Albanians in the cities they were born and not allow them to move in any other cities. So people that were born in Tirana were very lucky in comparison to the other ones. Next. And of course, we had only one case, Ganis Razimiri, that was the only person in 1965 until 1990 that spoke in written plans about cultural heritage and protection of monuments. So all plans by Italians, all plans done in the dictatorship, they were not, this word was not present, this notion and concept. Next. So we can see that 40,000 apartments were developed until 1990 in Albania. Next. So you see the traditional sense of the architect working in the main bureau, designing all these inputs for the cities, a very much centralized approach. But on the other side, an architect, a system, an institutional, let's say, bureaucracy that in fact allowed the dictator to pose wherever and whatever he wanted to place in any case. So there was not an issue of a plan, it was an issue of an image imposed from someone else. Next. This is what we inherited after those 50 years of dictatorship, not a pedestrian square, I have to say that. That one car and that one bus that are in the square was an issue of not being allowed to own a car. So this vast public space is not a public space for Albanians in 1990. It's a space to, let's say, celebrate, manifest dictatorship, the propaganda of the country. Next. And of course, during the moment that the split or the connection, better, happened in the rest of the world, we are this small pillow in the south. Next. And our wall was the fall of this statue, our dictator. Next. This wall that fall, of course, allowed Albanians to travel in the country, but also abroad. Next. And Albanian government, in order not to repeat heavily this image, this bark of Noah, let's say, leaving the country for other countries. Next. Allowed to and permitted this law. This law allows not only the privatization of apartments that tenants were living to, but also allowed people from other areas to whom their property was state-owned, was taken in the 1950s to build in any place in the country. Next. So you see the spread that is continuing in the 1960s, next, 1995, next, and you see next, you see the rural areas are becoming slowly urban, next, and next. You see natural areas, protected areas that suffer from that and are still suffering today. Next, I will say that many times, next. So you see what happens in 2000s, and in 2000s, next. This is Skanderbeg Square, that pedestrian square you saw before. Everyone wanted to have a Mercedes, so here they are. Next. And our actual Prime Minister, young mayor then, found out this situation. These are a small creek, river in the middle of the city, a creek that was occupied by informal buildings, restaurants, shops on the two bands of it, and it provided a totally different image from what you see here. So everything in this point was built along the river, informally, but also was a potential for him to show that he can do a good job. Next. So the idea was to use a cheap way of activism to introduce a change. So change was done through colors. Next, I will skip a bit. Invite also famous artists like Olafur Eliasson and many others. Provide this idea of how a splash of paint can change the city. And from the grey buildings of dictatorship in these new avant-garde, let's say, progressive colored facades. Next. That made him the mayor of the year at the time. Next. And allowed him to show examples like these ones of the cleaning of the river. Next. Not from the smell, though. And, of course, to allow the spread of the city even more. Next. So as everything is being done by speculation, the sense of bringing new ideas and architects like Vinnie Mas and MVRDV next, by speculative projects trying to introduce new building types next, and of course made Albania next, and of course made Albania very famous of this laboratory of architecture and urbanism. Next. The new public square, a new idea to pedestrianize the former square of the dictator. Next. And of course you see how it is today. Next. And you see also how the country is evolving all these years. Next. You might know the pyramids, a former museum from the dictator, built, never served as a museum per se, only maybe 1 year, but the intention 20 years after to destroy the pyramid and make a new parliament. How ironic. Next. And it was the first case of a public spread of activism to keep the pyramids. Next. And the pyramid today is preserved, but it's transformed into another building, not anymore the pyramid. Next. Another showcase of what would be formerly the Museum of the Dictator, now is an innovation center for children, hopefully. Next. And its image today. Next. Of course, many cases of activism were present. The idea even to climb the pyramid is a sense of activism. Next. And another very big important case, the National Theatre example. Next. Building designed by Giulio Bertè, an Italian architect in 1935. Next. And today, a proposal to, they already destroyed it, but a proposal to build this residential complex by Bjarke Ingels. Next. Always in the presentation of architects, I don't care about these diagrams and schemes. Next. Next. But I'm very careful and curious to see what other buildings are planned for our city that we don't even know, and Bjarke knew them. Next. So a massive protest happened at the time. Next. And for 2 years, people were occupying the theater. You have here letters sent from us to the Europa Nostra. Next. Letters refused from sent from us to the World Heritage Watch. Next. And here you see in the 17th of May in 2020, while in quarantine, we all woke up with this situation. Well, protesters were for 2 years there squatting the space in order not to be destroyed. Next. The case of this theater, I will cut short if you give me a bit more time. The case of the theater is a case that should stay like that, should stay destroyed. Is an act of a non-democratic situation. And this is an act also that enabled being somehow lucky, our political system, lucky. We had an earthquake in 2019, and as a result of the earthquake, they somehow forced a new law to destroy all buildings that are 50 years and older due to bad maintenance or low quality. Next. So imagine what that does to cultural heritage. Next. Since this is not loading, next. Okay. And if we're talking about activism in the buildings, next, we see activism, how you can preserve and how to preserve a national park, next. And of course, examples of what are happening in the park, next. Other cases of the park that is being taken out of the city, next. And of course, Tirana is like this today. Yeah? Everything moves along the historical boulevard, next. But what's going to happen on the extension of that boulevard, next, next, and next. So you see how the city is today. Is a city from 200,000 people to 1.2 million. Next. Next. You would see, next. You would see here protests of people that are being pushed out of their houses in order to develop this incredible new plan, incredible in terms of size. And this plan aims to reconstruct this whole area on the north side of the city. But the tenants there were removed forcefully. Next. So, next. So, a very short story on public activism. This was a square we did in 2013. We had the idea, we had a few money, we developed the square. Next. We did this small playground around all the blocks. Next. And we found out that, this is another square, but we found out that after 6 months, that old square was destroyed. The public space was destroyed because we didn't thought as tenants, we thought as architects. So we took a new initiative, next, and we worked almost for 1 year, next, in order to, next, okay, I'll let the video next. So we worked for 1 year asking from the inhabitants to give us €1 each. So they would be shareholders of the public space. We forgot to use the case of actually living in the space, living in Tirana, and the sense of ownership that is necessary to live in that city. So when people were engaged, they were of course able to help, they were all, of course very able to maintain the public space, and we did this movie 10 years after we developed the square, this public space. And it's still there, even better than we designed it. So the sense of ownership is absolutely important for a city like ours, and I think for every city in the world. Next. Next. And the sense of ownership, of course, is transmitted through one of the things we found very difficult to organize, but very successful, the open house festival in Tirana we organize. How we know our cities better, how we know buildings, how we know stories of people we've never met, but buildings we've walked 1,000 million times every day. Next. And sometimes we cannot know to design the city better. Sometimes we need to learn from what citizens inhabitants consider a public space in the neighborhood, and this is the case in Tirana. Next. And sometimes it's really difficult, but in the end, this is the only way to socially maintain sustainable public spaces, not only in terms of energy efficiency, not only in terms of architecture. Next, 2 more. So this is how I found Tirana in 2005 when I came back, living half of my life in Greece before. Next. And this is how Tirana is today, and is expecting to be developed even faster and even more. Also, the shot is taken from a very beautiful park we're trying to preserve. Next. And to close up, surpassing my time, and sorry for that, I think it's an issue of dialogue, it's an issue of being present, as many of us were maybe on their phones, maybe on other discussions, but I really want to thank you all for allowing me to invite me to be here to listen to all these different perspectives so we can all be physically present. Thank you.